Ukraine-Russia war, my view. I have watched and listened to views of Ukraine people, their president, the US, UK, and its allies' view, as well as Russia, China's view. Here is my view thus far. The war has started with the defiance of Ukraine president to give up the attempt to join NATO or be close to EU, despite repeated attempts by Russia to put across this serious security concern by the Russian. Russia has been, since the acquisition of Crimea, building up its military might to be ready to launch full-scale acquisitions of Ukraine. With sheer determination and concerted effort, Russia has managed to achieve this advance in cutting-edge military technology needed in just a few years to give Russia the utmost advantage for this acquisition attempt. Prior to the war, the Russian leader has tried to negotiate with the Ukraine leader to urge him to drop the idea to move closer to the US and its allies. Under the geopolitical security risk posed to Russia by Ukraine being closer to EU and NATO and becoming part of the NATO, by then it will be too late and costly for the Russia to act. Hence, in Russia's point of view, Russia has every right to fend off impending security risks at all costs at the earliest possible time, such that it will not be too costly and too late to act. However, Ukraine President naively, persistently defiant, thinking that he will have the backing of NATO, Ukraine ended up in war with Russia. The first few days of the war, US and its allies merely gave verbal encouragement to Ukraine to defend on its own. Cause US and allies think that Russia will succeed in its attempt in a relatively short time and not worth involving with direct conflict with Russia. When Ukraine people and army defense show strong fighting desire and manage to fend off Russia acquisition attempt in the first few days, US and allies saw a golden opportunity opening up to them that is similar to the opportunity that ended in the dissolution of the USSR in 1991. Meaning that with very little cost and resources and armed power required by the US and its ally, using Ukraine people and its army as a chess piece, there is a possibility of making Russia acquisition attempt ending up in failure. And by further supporting incite the growing descendants in Russia, as a result causing upheaval in Russia society by massive riot, uprising, and hopefully overthrow Russian leader at virtually very little cost and resources by the US and allies. Thus, this is actually the act of road relations. Immediately, US and allies, including neutral Switzerland, in a matter of just 1 to 2 days, adopted a concerted financial sanctions against Russia. Please note that the so-called ill-gotten hundreds of billions of sovereign wealth fund from Russia kept in the West for many years. This Western country has been benefited from it, and they took opportunity of this using the pretext of Russia invading. They want to confiscate this money in an attempt to create the possibility of making Russia's acquisition of Ukraine unsuccessful, and with subsequent effort by the West to incite Russia into internal uprising, hopefully to overthrow Russia leader at very little cost and resources. US and allies also very suddenly becoming very enthusiastic in supplying effective and powerful defensive arms to Ukraine to empower them as a chess piece to fight against Russia and make the Russia acquisition attempt a failure. And of course, US and allies did so under the high-sounding pretext of human rights and freedom. However, US and allies stopped short of offering Ukraine leader repeated and persistent plea and demand to set up a no-fly zone in Ukraine, because this will mean NATO will have to be involved in direct conflict with Russia in Ukraine war. NATO members' human rights, of course, is a million times more important than the human rights of Ukraine people. So the selfish game continues, with Ukraine leader disregard Ukraine citizens' safety and lives should the war escalate and allow millions of Ukraine refugees flooding into Europe. The Ukraine leader's selfishness and ego of wanting to become a hero, putting up a fake front that he is not afraid to die for his people, his nation, while at the same time sacrificing many resources into protecting him and his family from being captured, and also dupe the Ukrainian into thinking that he's patriotic. Ukraine leader has long been given a choice to be a neutral nation, such that it will not get involved in the war game or political struggle between Russia and NATO, and not be involved in helping NATO to create imminent security threat to Russia. However, this selfish and self-ego leader insisted to want to be a leader, disregard Ukraine citizens' lives and well-being, even to the extent to create millions of Ukrainian refugees, broken family, and most likely major cities and infrastructure will be destroyed during the war. It is okay to him. He still insisting in not taking the path of being neutral country to Russia and NATO. Hence, now causing millions of naive Ukrainians suffering, losing lives, injured, and end up with millions of broken families. What a despicable, shameless leader that deserves condemnation by everyone in the world. Stop this evil.